CJ McCollum had made some comments after the game. Kyle, if you could read that for me, that'd be great.
So CJ said after the game, availability is important, man. We've got to be available. We've got to do what we need to do off the court in terms of preparation, in terms of getting treatment, in terms of getting the right sleep, the right type of hydration, having the right type of diet. Everything has to matter for us, for everybody, 1 through 15. Now, depending on how you read that, that could be a subtle dig at Zion Williamson for not playing because he didn't feel like he was mentally ready to go. Or that could just be the culture within the Pelicans itself, which, two things can't be true at the same time, I guess, depending on how you read it. But I will let you guys interpret that quote from CJ how you want to. But Kev, I'm going to kick this one to you. What did you think about CJ McCollum's post-game comments about essentially players not being available for the Pelicans when they needed it the most?
I mean, you have to look at it from the situation at hand, right? Who is the biggest player on that roster? Who's the biggest name, the most paid player on the roster? Zion Williamson. Who is the guy that is never available for this team? Zion Williamson. Who is the guy that needs to take care and prepare a lot better? That includes his weight and staying healthy. Zion Williamson. Yes, that may have to do with the culture, but I think that Willie Green maintains a very good locker room. All his players, anybody that's ever talked about Willie Green, including Chris Paul, who is a very well-respected NBA player from a leadership perspective and from the NBA Players Association, have spoken volume about Willie Green, as well as Monty Williams, who also coached Willie Green when he was in the NBA. I don't necessarily think this is a cultural thing because I don't think Willie lets a lot of things slide. I'm looking at this and saying, CJ 100% is looking at Zion and saying, bro, the doctors cleared you. I'm playing with a busted shooting hand. My thumb is completely useless. It's consistently wrapped. He said it was hurting him. He's been bothering him for 3 months, should have had surgery, and he pushed it off. He's playing with a busted thumb. You got cleared. Yes, I am somebody that is always an advocate for mental health. I defended Ben Simmons last year when he didn't want to play in the postseason because he felt that he wasn't mentally there. People told me that, not me, people had said that he was going through some things that were very bad. It looked pretty bleak in terms of what he was going through, but no issues or no information was disclosed within that Ben Simmons situation. So, of course, me having my own mental health issues, I had spoken out and said, you know what? If he says he's not ready to go, that's a whole different category, right? You got to give him his time. But for Zion to say, I felt like I would have been able to, I wasn't able to give myself to the team. I wasn't going to be 100%. I wouldn't have fully been there. I would have been distracted. My man, even if you are 5% there, the fact that you're on the court means that the defense has to scheme for you. Even if you don't want to score, you can still get rebounds. You can still play defense. You can go out there, catch alley. I'm saying if you don't want to put your back to the basket and have the offense fed through you, there are a multitude of ways for you to contribute to a basketball team. You make the team better in transition. You make the team better in the paint. You make the team better at rebounding, and so on and so on and so forth. You're an efficient basketball player. You don't need to shoot the basketball. You just need to do what you do down low, and that's dunk the basketball, finish strong, and get to the free throw line. Get people in foul trouble. I'm not asking you to score 40. I'm not even asking you to score 20. You guys lost by, oh, of course, now I'm not going to be able to find it. You guys lost by 5 points. You telling me you couldn't give me 6? Zion Williamson, number 1 overall draft pick, biggest hype since LeBron James, been monitored since high school, since he was 14 years old. The guy that signed a $195 million contract this past offseason. The guy that's continuously up and overweight. The next sponsored athlete with Jordan, and just it continues and goes and goes and goes, right? The biggest hype. Everybody loves Zion Williamson, but he ain't never available. We always talk about a lot of players being busts and all these other players not being available. Zion Williamson's getting up there, man. It's getting to the point now where it's like, bro, you, Greg Oden, and so many other people, just they can't stay healthy. Except I can't even go and look at Greg and say, you know what, he didn't give it his all. If Greg was available, I guarantee you he would have suited up. I'm not saying I know anything that Zion's going through. I'm not sitting here pretending like I have an inside scoop as to what's in his head. But when a doctor says you're good to go and your 14 other teammates look at you and say, yo, we need you, bro, you got to put that mental thing aside. You have to. You don't need to be 100% there. You need to be able to give them whatever it is that you have. That is what sports are about. You barely played all season long. You were consistently fluctuating between being in weight, overweight, out of weight, whatever category you want to classify it as. You weren't available. The team fell short. That's not necessarily his fault because they had opportunities to either tie or go ahead. But if you're there, this may have been a whole nother dynamic. You guys could have won easily. You guys could have lost worse. But having the best player on the team active, available, and ready to go, at least suit up to say, hey, coach, if you need me, I'll get in there. I'm not ready, but I'll be there. If you played every single game your whole career or the majority of your games and you had said, coach, I can't do it today. I might be good here, but I'm not good here. I would look at you and say, you know what? You've given me your all your whole career. You haven't been available to get an off day, bro. You ain't got no PTO. It's the play-in tournament. This is to get into the playoffs. And you sold. You weren't there. So yes, I take CJ McCollum's comments 100% geared towards Zion Williamson to say, yo, I'm a vet in this league. I ain't getting younger. I'm playing through an injury. You're not hurt, and you're not playing. They got to do better. Zion Williamson is going to get traded this offseason or definitely needs to be shopped. The Pelicans need to listen to every phone call to see what they can get back for Zion Williamson because clearly he's not fit to be in New Orleans.
I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I disagree with him getting traded this offseason. I don't think that's going to happen. I will say, though, when it comes to his availability, the way that he was talking about physically he was ready to go, but mentally he wasn't. Kev, I honestly don't want to hear that. Because when it comes to a physical perspective, I would say most of those guys on the Pelicans roster were dealing with some sort of injury, whether it be a bruise, a nick. In CJ McCollum's case, you've got a messed up thumb for the last 3 months, but he's going out there putting everything that he can despite being limited. And yet you have Zion Williamson, who's basically been out for an extended period of time now.
4 months since January.
And he's ready to go physically, but he doesn't go out there because of some sort of mental thing. Honestly, I don't want to hear it. And, you know, as far as I see it, when it comes to Zion, I think that he's the difference maker when it comes to the Pelicans being a legitimate contender in the Western Conference. Kevin and I were talking about this a couple days ago. I specifically mentioned when it came to picking this game between the Thunder and the Pelicans, had Zion been ready to go and he played in this game, I would pick the Pelicans to win over the Thunder relatively easily. I think if Zion's in the fold, in whatever capacity they put him in, hell, they could bring him off the bench. I think the Pelicans could have won by 10 to 15 points. And, you know, after that, we'll kind of see where it goes to be able to figure out if they could get the final seed in the Western Conference. But the fact that he's sitting out and not putting any sort of effort out there because he's playing it safe, I have a very hard time believing that some of those Pelican players don't have a problem with that. I think some of those guys are probably looking at Zion a little bit sideways, knowing that, dude, you're physically ready to go. Not everybody here is healthy. Everybody's kind of dealing with their own separate injuries. Granted, you know, when it comes to Zion, I understand that he's had a boatload of injuries over the course of his career, but nonetheless, you're physically ready to go and you don't go out there. I'd be shocked if some of those Pelican players weren't pissed off at Zion about that. Especially CJ McCollum. You know, I have a lot of sympathy for CJ just based off of the fact that he'd been dealing with this pretty significant thumb injury for the last 3 months. He'd been pushing off surgery because of it. He's probably going to get surgery within the next week or two because of it. He was also saying post-game that he was dealing with a shoulder injury on top of that. That's why he was wearing the shoulder sleeve. So it's an unfortunate state of affairs when it comes to the Pelicans because I think had Zion been available for this game and was actually out there on the court, I think the Pelicans would be playing on Friday night. But unfortunately, he didn't. And I think when it comes to Zion's future with the Pelicans, I still believe that the Pelicans are going to keep him this offseason. I may agree with Kevin slightly about they may listen to some offers about Zion this offseason, but I don't think he's going anywhere. They've invested too much money into him, despite the fact that he has missed a lot of time, which is a fair point. I don't think they're ready to pull the trigger on moving on from Zion yet. So we'll see what happens with them this offseason. But I thought CJ McCollum's comments, I think he did take a subtle dig at Zion Williamson. I think maybe he was talking about just the overall culture within the Pelicans, that it needs to be enhanced to be a more competitive team in the Western Conference, which I do believe is true. The Pelicans could be a far better team than what they currently are, but it's injuries, man. Injuries are just an unfortunate side of the game, but I think CJ was really kind of focusing on Zion a little bit with those post game comments, but could also be a culture thing internally with the Pelicans as well. I'll just leave it at that.